Philippians 2:12-13, God's part and man's part. This passage is one of the clearest examples in Scripture of the harmony between God's work and man's responsibility. Context: Paul has just presented the supreme example of Christ's humility and obedience, Philippians 2:5-11. Because Christ humbled himself and obeyed the Father, Paul now turns to the Philippians and says, "Therefore, my beloved," in other words, because of Christ's example, you also must live in obedient submission to God. Verse 12, as you have always obeyed. Notice that Paul praises their obedience. This immediately refutes the idea that obedience is unnecessary in salvation. The Philippians had already demonstrated faithful obedience. Work out your own salvation. Paul does not say work for your salvation, earn your salvation, merit your salvation. He says work out your own salvation. The idea is to bring something to completion, to carry it through, to live it out fully. Just as an athlete works out a training program or a farmer works out a crop to harvest, Christians are to actively pursue spiritual growth and faithfulness. This harmonizes with Hebrews 5:8-9, James 2:24, 2 Peter 1:5-11, Revelation 2:10. Salvation is received by grace, but it must be lived out through faithful obedience. With fear and trembling. This is not terror of God. It is reverence, humility, and recognition of the seriousness of serving God. The Philippians lived in a pagan world where following Christ could cost them socially, economically, and physically. Paul reminds them that serving God is not something to approach casually. Verse 13, for it is God who works in you both to will and to do for His good pleasure. Some read this verse and conclude that God does everything while man does nothing. But notice the balance. Verse 12 says, work out your own salvation. Verse 13 says, for it is God who works in you. Both are true. How does God work in us? In the immediate context, God works through His Word, the Gospel, the example of Christ, the encouragement of fellow believers, His providential care. God produces both, the desire to will. God influences the heart through His truth. He motivates us toward righteousness. The action to do. God provides the means, strength, opportunities, and instruction necessary to obey. Yet the Christian must still choose to respond. The harmony of Scripture. Consider several examples. Noah. God provided the warning and the ark plan. Noah built the ark. Israel. God provided the promised land. Israel still had to enter and possess it. The Philippians. God provided salvation through Christ. The Philippians still had to obey and remain faithful. Christians today. God provides the gospel, forgiveness, grace, instruction, and strength. We must believe, obey, grow, and persevere. The key lesson. Philippians 2:12-13 is not God's work versus man's work. It is God's work and man's response. God is the source. Man is the responder. God initiates. Man cooperates. God provides the power. Man exercises faith and obedience. As Paul told the Philippians, as you have always obeyed, work out your own salvation with fear in trembling, for it is God who works in you. The Christian life is a partnership in which God's grace empowers faithful believers to grow, obey, and persevere until the day of Christ.